Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. My previous video was about a professional ceiling installation and I was showing you all the stages that we need to do in order to achieve a very good ceiling. So now I want to break down that video in three separate videos where I'm gonna explain to you all the stages and what you need to do in order to achieve a very good ceiling. The first video will be about ceiling insulation and I will show you how I did insulate all the ceilings in my house. Bear in mind this is the first floor rooms, so all the ceilings are at first floor just below the loft. So I'm gonna use 100 mm Rockwool solid slab insulation or rigid slab insulation from Rockwool, and I will use two of them 100 mm each, and I'm gonna show you now how I'm gonna install them. But let me tell you first what stuff you're gonna need in terms of tools and protection equipment. So as you can see here, first layer of insulation doesn't require too much. You will need a knife to cut insulation, you will need a tape measure and a straight edge. That can be a timber, whatever. Also you will need a mask or a respirator and you will need safety goggles. In my case I use this with a rubber so nothing can actually go behind the goggles. Our first layer of insulation will go between the ceiling joists. As you can see on this image, I'm going up on the ladder and I'm measuring between the ceiling joists and I'm adding 1 centimeters or 10 millimeters. So basically I will cut the insulation with 10 millimeters bigger. This way the insulation can stay between the joists nice and tight, but it won't be too tight and it won't curve, but at the same time it will not fall down. So here you're going to see me cutting the insulation, and if someone is wondering why do I have to go up on the ladder and measure for the insulation and come down and cut it, and I have to do this for every single piece, is because the floor joists are not parallel, so we don't have the same measurements in between the joists. This is obviously something that if you're gonna do it, you have to be very careful and make these joists parallel, otherwise it will take a lot longer to do the insulation. Is the same in here. I mean, the house obviously is being built by someone else up to some point. I will probably told you that few times already. So the floor joists are not parallel, so this is what I had to do throughout the house. I have to go up on the ladder, measure every single piece of insulation, come down and cut it, and then obviously go up and install it. And I will be honest with you, it does take time. This is a slow process because I want to make sure that the insulation is cut it right. So I don't want to have it either too small or too big and then just press it. I want to have it perfect because insulation is obviously a very important part of the house, especially that we are thinking to have a heat pump, and obviously with the heat pumps you have to be obviously the house has to be very well insulated. So because we have to do it, I just want to make sure that we're going to do it right. So I'm just going to take my time, cut the pieces perfect, and just install them. So after I cut the insulation, I'm just going to go up on the ladder and install it. I did said before, I left the insulation 1 centimeter bigger. This way the insulation will be easy to install in between the timbers without obviously damaging the edges, and at the same time the insulation will stay there and it won't fall down. So a few more things about insulation. I've seen a lot of people doing this wrong. I've seen a lot of people cutting the insulation bigger and just just throw it in and push it in on the edges and press it, and that is just not working. And then you wonder why the insulation doesn't do anything. I mean, you wonder why you are still paying a lot for your bills. It's because the insulation doesn't work properly. Put it this way, if you have a 5 centimeter gap where you have to install an insulation, and you take one insulation that is 10 centimeters and you just compress this to 5 centimeters, you will find out that that insulation doesn't work properly because is not at its full capacity. The insulation needs to be open up so it has air inside, otherwise it will not work. So pushing the insulation and cut it too big and push it in around the edges, that's not something that you have to do. Okay, so let me take you up close and show you how the insulation should look like. You can see here the insulation is at the same level with the timber all the way. We have a gap between the floorboards in the loft and the insulation. Is because the timbers are 15 centimeters and the insulation is just 10 centimeters, and we decided that we're gonna leave a 5 centimeters gap. You can see it's nice and tight, it's at the same level with the timber and is not obviously squashed in anywhere. So now we're just gonna measure, because we are on the ladder, we're gonna measure from the other piece of insulation. We're gonna go down, cut it and install it, and so on. This is what we have to do through all the house. You can imagine how easy it was if all the timbers was parallel, so if we will have the same distance in between the timbers, especially if you knew that before and you will allow for the insulation to be installed in full. So imagine, because that's the loft and the timber is 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters, imagine if they will be installed 59 centimeters apart from each other. So if you will have 59 centimeters in between the timbers, imagine how easy it was just to take the piece of slab, the insulation, and just push it in, and all you have to cut is obviously the edges. It's not the case, it's probably going to take us 3 times more to install it, but nothing that we can do. We will have to do a good job. Now I'm going to show you one more time how the insulation should be installed in between the ceiling joists. As you can see here, nice and tight, no gaps and no any damages to the edge of the insulation. So now I'm just going to obviously close the camera and I'm going to show you the second row of insulation, because we're going to have 2 layers of insulation. One will go in between the timbers and one will go on the timbers, and it will be installed with screws and some washer, some plastic washer designed for insulation. As you can see now, the first layer of insulation in between the timbers has been installed, and now we are preparing to install the second layer of insulation going across the timber, and we are going to secure this with screws and with insulation washers, and obviously they will be secured into the ceiling joists. So these are the screws. This 120 mil. The insulation is 100 mil, so that screw will actually go about 25 millimeters into the insulation, because the washer has a bit that will actually go into the insulation, and the screw will probably be catching about 25 millimeters into the actually timber, which is more than enough, because all it needs to do is to hold the insulation in place. And after that, we're probably gonna have some metal studs, something very cheap, that will go across the insulation just to make sure that the insulation will stay there, and but I'm gonna show you that in a few minutes. Now we're ready to start installing the second layer of insulation. This will go a lot faster than the first one, because we don't have to do that many cuttings. Basically most of them are just full pieces. We just taking them, make sure that they are nice and tight, and we are install them with these screws and washers. Bear in mind, these washers are specially designed for insulation. You can probably see on this image the left hand side of this insulation is actually leaning down a little bit. I was telling you about that metal stud, cheap metal stud that we're gonna use to secure everything in place, because at some point some of the insulation will obviously gonna be hold just in 2 screws, and that obviously is not enough. So because we don't want that to lean down and have a cold spot there, we're just gonna use these cheap profiles, and this way we're gonna make sure that the insulation will be nice and it will stay like that for a long time. As you can see, the second layer of insulation will go a lot faster because we don't have to do that many cuttings. I have to do one in here in the middle. Ideally you want to do obviously the cuts on the side, but because this cut was too small and it wasn't any timber to actually secure this small piece, this is why I choose to do the full slab on the left and just add this in the middle, where I can actually install 2 screws just on the side of the timber. Okay, so as you can see, the second layer of insulation is now complete. You can see the washers, so everything is nice and tight. All we have left to do now is to take this cheap metal profile and install them across the insulation. We're gonna use the same screws that are 120 millimeters long. We're just gonna pre-drill some holes where the timbers are and just screw this profiles in place. So what they're gonna do, they're gonna go into the middle of the insulation, and we're just gonna make sure that that insulation will never gonna come loose, and obviously we're not gonna have a cold spot in there. I use 4 profiles because we have 4 layers of full insulation, and on the side we only have like 28-29 centimeters piece, which was very nice, hold it in place with screws and everything, so we didn't have to do it there. But the 4 full insulations, 4 full rolls of insulation, we did this profile. I did the same everywhere in all the house, because in some places, like I said, one slab of insulation will be just hold it in 2 screws, and we don't want that to obviously come loose in time. So this will be everything about the insulation. As you can see on these images, the insulation is complete. The profiles are in place. Now what we have to do is to install our laser level and make the levels for our suspended ceiling. But that will be a different video where I'm going to show you how to install a suspended metal ceiling, and I'm gonna show you the system. That system is available in all Europe. I think it's a very good system and it's very nice and easy to work with. So thank you very much for watching. This was the first video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the video, and I will see you next time with a video about the ceiling installation, the ceiling grid installation.